Today, I'm going to show you how to attach different objects to players. With this, you can do things like replacing players with props, attaching lights to players, and my personal favorite, and the mechanic I'll be recreating in this video, attaching players to other players using a chair device. But first, to celebrate hitting 1,000 subscribers, we're going to be giving away a month free subscription to Map Academy. If you don't know what Map Academy is, it is a package that allows you to create all sorts of maps without ever needing to learn how to develop. With the scripts and assets we provide, you'll be able to set up, customize, publish, and ultimately earn profits from your own creations. On top of this content, you get access to a lot of free bonus stuff, including access to a like-minded community, support for all questions, and even monthly script requests. If you want to take part in the giveaway, make sure to subscribe and leave a comment on this video. We will be picking a random winner approximately 1 week after posting this video. Alright, so let's get right into the tutorial. The first thing we need to do is go to our Verse Explorer and create a new verse file in our project. I'm going to call this a attach player device, or just attach player, and hit create. Now to open this up, we can just double click on that. In our verse file, the first thing that we need is going to be our actual chair device. So I'm going to make an editable of type named chair, and it's going to be of type chair device and equal to just a normal chair device. Now we need to make a function that's going to attach this chair to a player. Then we also need a way to actually activate when the chair gets attached to the player. So I'm going to use a signal remote device. You can also use things like a button if you'd want, but I'm going to make an editable of remote manager, and it's going to be a signal remote manager device, which is equal to the same thing. And now let's go ahead and activate something off of this remote manager. So I will say remote manager dot primary signal event dot subscribe to attach to player, and then let's now make this function. So if I call it attach to player, if we go into our signal remote manager, you'll see our primary signal event sends an agent. So I will receive an agent, which I'll name agent as well, but it's going to be of type agent, and it's not going to return anything. Under this, I'm actually going to call another function because we cannot make this suspending, and to attach our chair to the player, we need a suspending function. So I'm going to call this attach to player new, and I'm going to send it the agent, and I'm also going to spawn this function. Now let's go ahead and create this. So to do that, to make it easier, I'm just going to duplicate this function and then change the name to our new function. And then in this function, first we need to make it suspending. First, I'm going to get the for character of our agent. So to do this, you need to make an if statement. And in this, I'll call it a FC for character, and it's going to be equal to agent dot get fort character, and then you need brackets at the end of that, and then you need a colon at the end of your if statement. And here we have an error because we need to be using characters, so just go ahead and copy this and put it at the top. Now that we have the for character, we're going to make a loop that will constantly teleport this chair to the for character. So I'm going to make a loop, and the first thing in my loop is going to be a sleep. It's going to be 0.0. Now get the player's position. So to do this, we'll say fc.get transform, and now this will be 3 different values. This consists of the translation. Actually, we can control click on this to see if we see what a transform is. We have a scale, a rotation, and a translation. So if we go back to get the actual position, that'll be the dot translation. This needs to be capitalized, and then we also want to get the player's rotation. So I'm going to just copy this, but instead of getting the translation, we'll get the rotation. But these are just the values. We actually need variables to be able to use these. So I'm going to call this the player position and set it equal to the player's translation, and a player rotation, which is going to be equal to the player's rotation. So right now we have a loop that starts whenever our remote manager gets signaled, and every single second it's going to get the player's position and rotation. Now we need to move this chair device to that position and rotation. So to do this, There's two ways. You can either use teleport to, which will teleport the chair instantly every single loop, or move to, which will move the chair from its current position to the player's position over a certain amount of time. I prefer using move to, as it gives a much smoother animation for it, rather than teleport to, which will end up being quite choppy. So to use move to, we'll say chair.move to, and then if we actually look at move to, it won't let me control click because I have an error. But if I go to our Fortnite digest and control F and search for move to, you'll see that it takes a position, a rotation, and a time. So here our position is going to be our player position. Then our rotation is going to be our player rotation. And then our time, I'll just say 0.1. So now we have a loop that's going to constantly teleport a chair to the player's position. So let's go ahead and test this out to make sure it's working. If I minimize our verse code and build our verse code, then if I go to our content browser, we'll have our attached player verse device. And then in this, we need to select our chair device and our remote manager. So I'll get both of those. I'll search for a chair device and drag it here. Then I am going to also search for a remote manager device and place it here. In this, I'm just going to change the signal remote tier to legendary. It can be whatever you want. Now that I have both of those, I'll select them. There is one more thing that we need to be able to properly test this, is a way for the player to receive the signal remote so that they can actually activate the manager. So to do this, I'm going to search for a item granter device. And here in the settings, I first want to change this to keep all, add a signal remote, make sure it's the same tier as you selected in your signal remote manager there. Then I'm going to change receiving players to all, and I'm going to scroll down here and select grant on game start. Now with that, I'm going to launch session and test it out. So now in game, whenever I press my remote, you'll see our chair is attached to us, but yeah, there's a problem. It's actually inside of us. So let's go ahead and fix that. What we want is our chair device to be on top of the player rather than inside of the player. So to do this, we need to increase the height where the chair spawns. So what we'll do here is whenever we're moving the chair to the player's position, we will add a vector 3. But whenever we add the vector 3, you'll see we get an error because we need to use spatial math. Then in this vector 3, we want to increase the z-axis. So I will say z is equal to, and then we'll say something like 70. Now let me go ahead and just go back to UEFN, build verse code, and push verse changes. So now back in game, if I press the remote, the chair is now instead on my head. But now that we have it above the player, I want to be able to actually make it so other players are seated in this chair. So let's go ahead and end game and go back to our verse code. Here, whenever we attach the chair to the player, we also want to get a separate player and seat them in the chair. So the simplest way to do this is actually just to go into our attach to player function here and go through every single player in our play space. So to do that, we will have a for loop through every single player. And to get every single player, we'll get the play space. And then in that play space, we will get all of the players like this. And then at the end of the for loop, we need a colon. So now this will go through every single player in the entire map or the game. Now, what we'll want to do is first check if that player is the same as our agent, because we don't want to seat ourselves in the chair, we want to seat someone else. So we'll make an if statement and say if not player is equal to agent. So if the player that we're currently looking at is not equal to the player who activated the signal remote, then we will take our chair device and seat our agent. Or not our agent, we'll seat our player, because the agent is the player who activated our signal remote. So we'll instead seat a player. So this will always seat the very first player who joined the game, who is not the activating player. So now I'm going to do two things to test this. First, I'm going to log on my ult account so that I can test with another player in the match. And then second, I'm also going to make this chair instead be invisible so that it won't have collision and interfere with my player. Okay, so now back in game, I have my ult and the chair is invisible. And if I press this, you'll see my ult is now on top of my head. But you can see they lag a little bit behind, and it's also still a little bit jump cutty. On top of this, I want to move them down a bit because they're a little too high. They're not really on my shoulders. And I'm also going to add a way to throw the player. So let's do that. Back in our script, the first thing I'm going to do is decrease the height. So instead of 70, I'll change this to, let's say, like 40. Now I'm going to make it smoother. So our problem here is move to is actually a synchronous function, meaning whenever our loop runs, it's going to run all of this code and then it's going to move and wait 0.1 seconds before it loops again. Instead, we want it constantly looping every 0.0 seconds. So to fix this, what we can do is actually just spawn this move to function so that instead of waiting for this move to finish before running the loop again, it's going to continually move the chair. So now the very last thing I want to do is actually be able to throw the player. So I'm going to copy our line here, but instead of a primary signal event, I'm going to activate the throw player off of a secondary signal event. And then instead of subscribing to our attached player, I'm going to make a new function called throw player. Now let's go ahead and create this. And it's going to take an agent and return nothing. So we'll just copy that. So in this function, what we want to do is eject the player from our chair. So if we go to our chair device, you'll see we have an eject function, one that can take the agent and one that can eject any agent who is currently in the chair, which is what we're going to use. So all we want to do is say our chair dot eject. And now with that, if I minimize this and build verse code and push for changes, we can test it out in game. So now in the game, whenever I press my primary mouse button, left mouse click or left trigger, it'll attach the player. And then whenever I hit right click, it'll eject the player, but it does not send them very far. So if we end the game and look back in our editor, you will see in our chair device, whenever the chair is invisible, it doesn't allow you to click on this like this. But what you can actually do is press T and it'll allow you to click on transparent objects. Just a cool little shortcut. But now if I go down here and you'll see we have dismount settings. So a dismount direction, which I'm going to keep as camera facing, and then we have a force and upwards force. So this I'm actually just going to increase by a lot. If we go 500, it'll be 50 meters per second. And then the upwards force, I'm going to say this as, let's just put it about halfway. Now if we just go ahead and save and go back into our game and start it, instead, whenever I attach my player and then I right click, it throws the player a lot farther, and you can just continue to do this. But you see it's a little misaligned, and this is actually just because of this dismount direction. If I just change that to forward, it'll always be in the direction of the chair, which will be in the direction of my player. So now one final test. Whenever I throw the player, they get sent flying. That's it for how to attach different objects to a player. If you enjoyed this tutorial and you want to help me become the #1 Map Academy channel on YouTube, please go down right now and hit that subscribe button. Also, if you have any ideas for more tutorials I can create, please leave them in my community Discord. I have a special channel for it called Tutorial Requests. I actually got the idea for this video from a request, so make sure to leave any ideas you might have so I can continue to create awesome tutorials for you guys. Anyways, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.